Good afternoon. Call this special meeting of Marysville City Council to order. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Councilmember Rollins. Here. Councilmember Gilchrist.
Here.
Councilmember Hudson.
Here.
Vice Mayor Buttacavoli.
Here.
And Mayor Branscombe.
Yes, right here. Thank you. Let's pledge the flag. Pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, republic for which one nation, God, liberty and justice.
Okay. Madam Clerk, any changes to the agenda?
Not today.
Mr. City Attorney, anything to report?
There is nothing to report.
Okay. We've got a discussion action calendar with one item on it. Anybody online here wants to talk about it, talk to Maggie. The item is budget presentation, discussion and presentation only. Contact and decide. Please proceed.
Thank you, Council and Mr. Mayor. Before we begin, I would like to request and respectfully request if I could sit here for my presentation so I can have all my notes and computer, as there's not enough room on the podium.
Give us your full voice, because when you sit back, it's hard to hear you through that microphone.
Okay, I will. Perfect. So, if it's okay, I'd like to sit here for the presentation. Great. Okay. Through the chair, thank you so much for being here today. This is the start of the presentation for the fiscal 26-27 City of Marysville municipal budget. This is a brief overview of what we will be looking at today. I'm just going to briefly go over through the major points. You'll have a message from management shortly after this slide, an economic overview. We'll have an overview of revenues and expenses, departmental overviews, enterprise fund overview, closing remarks, and then if there are still any questions at the end, there will be a time for that. This is a message from management. I do want to highlight that staff is presenting a balanced operating budget for council review. The fiscal 26-27 budget is a transitional year, especially for public safety. With the annexation of the City of Marysville's fire department to the Linda Fire Protection District, it does represent a transitional year as we move through the process as it pertains to expenses and a portion of our revenues and city funds that will be at some future date, if agreed upon, transferred over. The budget consistently has relied upon Measure G, which is our voter referendum sales tax initiative, cannabis tax, ad valorem property taxes, and other various kinds of revenue streams. Again, I do want to repeat, because I do believe that it is very important to note that it is a transitional year for the City of Marysville as it pertains to the fire department's annexation. Staff will consistently continue to monitor all revenues and expenses as a whole in aggregate, and hopefully be able to better provide transparency as it pertains to all of our expenses as we move forward. Just as a brief economic overview of where the economy is at this point in time, inflation is still high. It's increasing steadily, and hopefully it'll plateau at some future time. Wage growth within the city, while it is growing, we are still not keeping up with the neighboring entities and agencies within this greater area. Rates of unemployment are also steadily increasing. Hopefully it'll remain within the mid 4% range as time goes on, and the stock market, and I can attest to this personally, is doing quite well. And I do want to note that given the volatility of the market right now, I am very, very closely watching our investments. We're doing very, very well in that regard. We have $6.6 million approximately invested in various other agencies, whether that's with the county or our UST bills. We also invest quite a bit with the Local Agency Investment Fund, or LAIF. And those rates are, again, market rate at this point in time, anywhere between 380 to 400 basis points. So that is a good return at this point in time, in considering where we are. I do want to bring a little bit more into the state and how it pertains to Marysville. I don't think the state budget in this regard really affects us, but it may affect the county on different levels. The May revision for Governor Newsom's budget, he closed the structural deficit that they had, but by doing so, he cut major programs to homelessness programs. He banned certain local impact fees, and he really amended the focus on the public health infrastructure. Now, on a city level or a local jurisdiction level, we may not see those changes, but on a county level, there's definitely some structural changes there, and we won't know how they impact us until we move forward through the fiscal year. I do want to state that the new budget priorities for the state, which will then allow us to begin collecting some of those revenues, is a digital sales tax. It's new software taxes that add more taxable items to sales tax by the end of 2027. That will basically allow us to start collecting sales tax from other kinds of software companies, whether that's on a subscription basis or any sort of other software needs, and hopefully that will increase our tax basis. HDL is the software that we utilize that helps us track all of the sales tax that we receive and categorizes them into different types of categories and jurisdictions on whether that's county or local. Those things are something that we should be looking into to see if we are receiving a portion of that. The California Department of Tax and Fees Administration, or the CDTFA, is very good at making sure that we are either investigating those opportunities, because they do have that service that they do provide to us, or that they are adding it to our sales tax amounts on a true-up basis once they do figure out that it should exist and the city should have received it. So I do want to make sure that we are continuing to look at different ways to increase revenues, and this is one thing that the state has afforded to us at this point in time. A little bit about the local insight. So again, I do want to say that staff is presenting a balanced budget at this point. Measure G still remains a very successful voter initiative. Annually, we anticipate anywhere between $3.9 to $4 million in Measure G dollars. And that is something truly that we can attest to how our local constituents and the local economy has stimulated this community. I do want to note that these are some local statistics from this greater area. We still are averaging out about a 12,700, 12,800 population. Median age is 33.7 years old. One thing to note is that the poverty levels in Marysville have risen about 8.8% from last year to this year. And so we do want to be mindful as opportunities arise in the community to start beginning to provide services to hopefully mitigate that as time goes on.
Pardon me, how is poverty measured?
Poverty is measured by the amount of median income household from the prior year and the amount of average income household from the subsequent year, and there's other metrics in between about the rates. So
it's compared to some standard?
Yes. It's
okay.
all through the Census
What
Bureau.
is the standard?
I'm sorry?
What is the standard? What's the number? Because it's household income, right?
It's usually household income. Household income in Marysville is approximately $62,000.
Right. But you say, I'm just talking about the poverty rate. If 24% poverty rate, they're below a number. What is that number?
62,000.
52.
Through the chair.
62.
62.
Through the chair. Sir. Thank you for asking that question, because I was curious about that. Anissa, can you tell me, have those metrics changed, or they stayed the same year after year? I mean, not the 24 number, the metric range that is used to consider whether you're poverty or not.
So there's a federal level, which I believe is somewhere in, I think nationally is around, at the last time I looked, is probably around $28,000, $30,000 federally. Okay. And then locally, it will just depend on whether you're in a very high cost of living to a high or lower cost of living area. In Marysville, I have seen, since I've been here, 2 years ago it was 58,000. I know even last year into this year is about 62,000. So that median household income rate is going up, but it's not pacing to what the standard of living is at this point in time, especially in the state of California.
Wow, I'm in the poverty level, I guess. Thank you.
I'm starting to worry too.
To the chair.
Sir.
Was the poverty level 47,000 5 years ago when we were looking at the Eastlake apartment building going in? Because if I remember correctly, that was the rate then.
I'd have to
47,000.
I'd have to look that up. I'm not sure.
Okay.
There's been a lot of play there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So now we'll move on to the actual revenue portions of the general fund. I do want to notate that bolded number at the top, the $13,732,000, is the total amount of revenue received in the general fund for the proposed fiscal 2026-2027 budget. With that in mind, we'll go through the major categories. So the first one is property taxes. Now, I do want to note that property taxes is inclusive of several lines in your packet. You know what, I should have. If you look at lines, I do. The 1.1 million, the 36,000, the 115,000, and the 876,000. That's a portion of it. It equates to $2.1 million. And the balance of it are the various other taxes on the bottom, which is Prop 172, transfer tax, TOT tax, and other franchise. It's all considered taxes at this point in time, which is how we come up to that $3.1 million number. We'll move on to sales tax or Measure G tax, which is 2.7. Now, before we move on, I did want to represent, before I forget, that a portion of these taxes, 40% of it has been reduced to account for the annexation.
Now, this is the 60% remaining.
This is the 60% remaining. So
Better stated.
Okay, so before we move on, I do want to notate that that reduction in sales tax is due to the annexation, which is effective 7/1 for all intents and purposes. And then the other thing that is also affected by annexation is the sales tax or Measure G, which is $2.73 million. And that is, we are retaining 70% of it at this point in time, unless otherwise negotiated. And this is the true value of what we should be anticipating for fiscal 27. Bradley Burns is at $2.6 million. That is untouched by the annexation. That is full revenue realized and will retain within city limits. And then we have various other taxes like Prop 172, which is a public safety augmentation, which is tax dollars received through sales tax intended for the utilization of police or law enforcement purposes. It's usually categorized as part of general fund revenue and will offset costs for the police department. It's something that you get annually. And we'll be collecting about $215,000. And then you have various other taxes. So then we'll move on to the permits, fees, and fines. This approximate just over $2 million number is various construction fees, encroachment fines, or encroachment fees, planning fees, just various other permits, fees, and fines. With the prospect of the hotel being constructed at this point in time, we should be anticipating approximately $425,000 in building fees. And I do want to notate that that is more than I think we've collected in prior years, and that's something that we can attribute to the growing development that we have in Marysville. Grants is $1.7 million. A majority of this has to do with prior year grants or other programs that we are in agreement, like the Hard Rock Casino agreement that sunsets in 2034 is included in this grant portion, or other revenue. And then we also have the Prop 64, which is prior year expenses incurred in prior fiscal years. And we're now receiving the reimbursement a few fiscal years later, and that is for $400,000.
And the other revenue, are those the transfers from the reserve?
No, other revenue is, let me scroll. Other revenue is interest earnings and miscellaneous. Interest earnings was rebooked at $380,000. We're due to collect $425,000 at the end of this fiscal year. That is primarily just due to interest rates being higher than what they normally have been. Is there a further question?
The transfers from the reserves showed up somewhere in revenue, did they not?
Yes.
Where?
It's in grants. It's just somewhere where we put them. I can move them into a separate line item, but the accounts right now don't exist. Until approval from the full governing body, I chose not to implement them into my accounting system until approval.
Well, just a minute. I've got them right here in the last copy of the budget I've got.
It's line, well, you don't have lines.
Line 154 and 155. Revenue source from annexation transfer, and that'd be depending on the outcome of negotiations on how, if and how that's done, 297,000, and then a transfer from reserve for the OSHA expenses. Two of those equal almost $600,000.
That's in that grant line item, the $1.7 million.
Yes. Anyway, not grants. It should be.
It will be.
I mean, these are transfers from reserves. That's a rare and significant matter. It should be separately stated.
If it will be separately stated as we move to the non-departmental and special items slide, which is later in the presentation. Are there any further questions about this slide? Any further clarification? Be more than happy to. Four major expenditure categories. Again, the bolded bottom line number is $13,731,000. I've combined a majority of our expenses into these four categories. So we have salary and wage. This is citywide, all through the general fund. It's $6.37 million. Last year it was approximately $8.5 million. The decrease is due to the fire annexation. We removed all the associated costs from the fire department out of the general fund, and it has not been incorporated at this time. So you also have operations and maintenance. Again, this is citywide. The operation maintenance for last year for the fire department was approximately $600,000, and so you do have a reduction in that line item as well. Non-departmentals included of a majority of more than 50% of that is general liability, workers' comp, health insurance, and things of that nature, as we're talking to car insurance and just non-departmental that otherwise don't belong in a specific department, and they're part of general government services. We also have general debt service. Your general debt service is incorporated and inclusive of the pension obligation bonds. Through a new accounting requirement, we had to move all of our operating leases out of another fund and put them in the general fund. And so now all of our vehicle leases and all of our other types of apparatus leases, not just for, mostly for public safety, some for various other departments, but a majority of them are now considered part of general debt and have been moved into the general fund.
It's on the 3 engines or apparatuses for the fire department?
Yes.
Thank you.
May I proceed? So now we'll go into the departmental overview. This will go by department. I do want to note that I have consolidated the administration into the city manager and finance director. Our budgets have minimal changes, and I'll be honest, there isn't a ton of on the discretionary side. So there is a new human resources that will be up for discussion, and we go through the various. Now, I did include the fire department. And that will go further into what's happening and what's going to occur with the fire department as it pertains to the budget and the whole process. So this is the administration, which is inclusive of the city manager and the finance director's budget. Through discussions with some council members, it was recommended that the cost allocation for the enterprise fund and the streets fund, if at all, were to be decreased from 25% to 20%. And there's also more so on the finance department allocated to the city manager's budget to compensate for that increase, as to not put the full burden on the community and economic development budget. Salary adjustments also reflect the cost of living adjustments and increases for relevant staff. Operations and maintenance costs decreased by 5% in effort to balance the budget. Jim and I both decided to take a brunt end of the cuts. And outside of our department, you'll see significant cuts in fleet maintenance, and all departments have experienced some minor cuts in the nature of conservation. May I proceed?
Through the chair.
Sir.
You said that you've taken the brunt of the cuts in your discretionary budgets that you have, or
the city as a whole, to make the budget work with the uncertainty of the annexation, and in an effort to reallocate some of those other funds, the administration took the burden of a portion of that and then divvy out the rest of it through the other departments. So I will get into that. Upon adoption, I will be meeting with our departments to discuss what those cuts are. And if they can be adjusted at the mid-year point, we will make that recommendation at that point in time.
Thank you.
May I proceed? So we have the Human Resources Department. There is a request of a new position for the Human Resources Director. It is an increased cost to recruit a full-time employee. It is approximately, so there's two thresholds. What was budgeted at this point in time was for the maximum rate, which is $165,000 a year, and we're suing with a classic pension plan. There's PEPRA and classic, or two different tiers of pension depending on date of hire, and other retirement calculations. So fully loaded with a family plan is approximately $220,000. To the $220,000 to the general fund. Now, there is already an existing HR employee there.
Just a moment. What number is $220,000?
It's a consolidated number between salary and wage, health insurance, pension, vision, health, everything.
Now, we're looking at HR, right?
Yes, that $236,000 number you see in salaries or permanent salaries, that is the base salary for the Human Resources Director at $165,000, and the balance.
Okay, fully loaded, it's $311,000 with all benefits, right?
For both employees, yes.
Okay. Now, where did that $220,000 number come from?
That's separating just the HR Director from the $311,000.
So it's $220 fully loaded.
Fully loaded.
And is that at the lowest on our schedule? I mean, I'm sure you must.
No.
I don't know what you guys have. We have schedules. We have step 1 through whatever.
So we do have a salary range. It's in our executive and mid-management MOU, and that range, I believe, is $130,000 to $165,000. The HR director is proposed to be budgeted at that higher amount, not necessarily to employ them at that dollar amount, but to give the opportunity to recruit in that regard. Now, I'm not going to speak for Jim, but I do believe that it will be at the discretion of the city manager to compensate the employee as they see it.
Based on experience? Based
on experience and on other factors.
Okay.
So that 165 is at the higher end of the range. The bottom of the range is 130,000. And if we wanted to do that same fully loaded number with a classic with benefits and a family plan, is approximately $180,000 on the lower end. I do want to reference that there is a potential for a cost sharing with the Linda Fire Department. Or Fire Protection District, rather, and they would be willing to negotiate a 30% share of that total cost. So the city
total cost,
of the total cost, or just the HR director salary?
Just the HR director, from my understanding, and this can be negotiated at some future date, but from my understanding, it was the HR director salary and the fringe that goes with it.
But that's not how it's presented in here.
Well, no, what's presented in here is just because it hasn't come to fruition. We haven't negotiated, it hasn't come to
We're still in
anything.
negotiations, are still in the process,
Correct.
and I understand that. But the total cost for the HR salary and benefits is the $311,122. So I highly recommend that when you do negotiate that you include the the benefits, because those are statutory benefits related to the cost of an employee. and also, and all the HR services and supplies should also be included in the 30%. That's my recommendation. I know I don't negotiate, but I really feel that that's the total cost for an HR department.
The initial discussions were for salary and benefits. We still got negotiation to go, and we'll see where that leads. It may or may not come to fruition.
I'm saving my comments on this until we've gone through the whole. I'll have comments later on HR.
Where are we? So I also have, again, cost of living adjustments for the current employees. We do have an HR tech on staff, and they are usually, they align with the teamsters bargaining unit. Anticipated costs for bargaining unit negotiations consultant. Last year we hired Mr. Patrick Clark for those negotiations. And at that point in time, as the year progresses, we will be coming due for those negotiations again. It was a 2-year contract. And then we do have increased costs associated with personnel matters and recruitment for public safety. You do see quite a bit of a jump in some of those line items. And I do want to notate that personnel matters, and whether they be investigative in nature, and also recruitment for public safety is quite expensive. And as we go to the public safety portion of it, you'll see that we do have 7 vacancies in the department.
If I may.
Sure.
The line item, professional and specialized services, and I think that's what you were just speaking about, $100,000 line item in services and supplies?
Yes.
And that's for the background. What does that encompass?
So a majority of that is background checks. I believe we do our backgrounds by Bruce Taylor, right? Okay.
What's the average cost per background check for a police officer?
I believe it's between $1,500 and $1,800.
Okay, that's not 100,000. So how do we get to 100,000?
So if you want to, I know where. So in my experience, what I have seen thus far when it comes to the recruitment process on that is, for one position, they will background multiple people to ensure that the candidacy or the candidate pool that they have already been pre-screened. So when they go to the interview process and making sure they're a good fit for the department, and correct me if I'm speaking out of turn, but to my understanding is having an available pool is what drives these costs up, because if you have one position but you're potentially backgrounding, let's say 3 to 4 candidates instead of just one candidate, that increases your cost.
So it could be $10,000 per position.
Sure.
A lot of money can be saved.
So that's just how the city has historically recruited, and to the police department's support, we have.
Then what's our hit rate out of 4 or 5? Are we getting 1? If the pool is 4 or 5 people that you've done a background check on, and we've got $10,000 invested, what's our hit rate? How many do we recruit?
I mean, it depends. We have a really tough time with dispatch. For one position, we could do 4 or 5 backgrounds and just get 1, because people just keep failing out.
High price of turnover, right? Thank you.
So I do want to highlight that as much as that line item has increased, I do think it's important that the police department finds the appropriate candidate as it pertains to the management of their department. So moving on from that, if I may, I just want to also say that historically human resources has also been, for lack of a better word, a catch-22 account, where a lot of general government services or interfund transfers have been made in and out of the account. I'm trying to remove all that and put it where it belongs. And so we're creating new accounts. We're just kind of cleaning everything up. So you will see a history where some line items may have nothing, and some line items may just be newly created, because this is how I'm choosing to move forward with the accounting as appropriate. So this is our non-departmental and special items. I do want to clear up that non-departmental is also inclusive of general liability, workers' comp, car insurance, IT, things that don't necessarily belong in specific departments, but management manages them at the higher level. So information technology contract, we do contract with Alliant currently, is subject for renewal in fiscal 2027. I did receive the review from the third party we can have been speaking with to review the contract. I'm in the process of reviewing that at this point in time. The proposed adjustment for year one was recommended, but management will formally recommend to evaluate the contract during the fiscal 27 year for financial sustainability. The contract increase, even though it is all-inclusive, just the price of IT has gone up significantly, and now governments are being encouraged to utilize government-specific software platforms, and even Microsoft 365 has gotten more into the government sector. And so enforcement and supporting the cybersecurity of the city, software is very expensive at this point in time. And with the requirements that insurance makes us have for cybersecurity, it is something that we're going to need to consider within the next couple of fiscal years as we move to modernize our entire information technology infrastructure. Again, something that is a special item, in my opinion, is the Cal OSHA appeals. There is a revenue line item at the top when we had previously discussed, and there's an appropriate expense. It's a net zero budget item because it's being drawn down from the reserve. The Cal OSHA appeals process is estimated and proposed at $300,000. If this is where I will request that if council has a different recommendation, to please make a motion to adjust that number, or if everyone is comfortable with it, I can proceed.
We're just hearing about it today. Nothing's happening.
So then we also have, as part of the fire annexation process, is to remit a portion of the city's unrestricted general fund reserve to the district. That is also represented as part of the reserve in the revenue portion and the corresponding expense account on the bottom. Again, it is a net zero budget item because it's a direct drawdown from the reserve. It's just to increase transparency that it was presented in the budget in this manner. Insurance rates have increased approximately 20 to 30% depending on coverage and policy type. I did just attend my insurance board of directors meeting. Our loss run for workers' comp has increased pretty dramatically. We have about a $200,000 increase just in workers' comp alone. And then our unfunded pension liability also increased almost, I think it's $195,000 as well. So that major increase has been cost allocated as appropriate, as the general fund should not be shouldering the full burden of that. And then also, again, non-departmental is special events planning is included in this category, such as the 4th of July celebration, the Peach Festival, and the holiday parade. Now we get on to the police department. There are 7 current vacancies, and I do want to notate that the police department, for the purposes of this presentation, has been consolidated in the fact that it's inclusive of sworn and non-sworn, dispatch, and animal care. So not a ton of change outside of the 2% increase for bargaining unit employees. The 7 vacancies are 3 sworn, 3 dispatch, and 1 CSO. If they've otherwise been filled at this point in time, I apologize, but this is the information that I have. There are 7 total vacancies across the board in the police department, and I do want to stress that to promote institutional capacity, that they are fully funded, so it gives our police chief the flexibility to recruit just to fill those positions.
Pardon me, are the authorized headcounts, are the headcounts applied in the number that comes up with 7 vacancies? Is it the same headcount as the previous year?
Yes.
Thank you.
Adjustments in health insurance coverage for current employees. We've had quite a bit of change within the police department on who is taking an insurance incentive withdrawal to who's choosing to have coverage with the city. So health insurance, just on that regard, has increased. And then the acquisition of personal protective equipment, or PPE, is being requested to make sure that the police department is operating to the safest level that they can. The other thing I want to highlight is the Field Haven contribution has increased. That line item for animal care used to be approximately $30,000. It was $15,000 for Yuba County to handle canines, and then it was $15,000 for Field Haven to handle felines. At this point in time, Field Haven requested that the amount that they were receiving as a minimum contribution was not enough to sustain them in their operations. We understand the nature of the services that I provide, and the city and management believes that it is in the best interest of the community to appropriate an additional $30,000 for Field Haven. So Field Haven's new contract will be $45,000 all in. Are there any questions regarding these items?
To the chair.
Sir.
30 additionally?
Yes.
This year?
This year.
Aha. I was under the impression it was 15.
So that was an oversight on the previous drafts on my part. I had appropriated $30,000 or $45,000, but did not incorporate the $15,000 for the Yuba County portion of it to handle canines.
I understand.
So it was an oversight on my part. It is a full $60,000 line item at this point in time.
Thank you.
This is the fire department. Again, effective July 1st, 2026, the Marysville Fire Department will be annexed to the Linda Fire Protection District. The Linda Fire Protection District is obligated and required to provide fire service to Marysville city's limits effective July 1st, 2026. All employees, and I can have John chime in, but all employees will be transferred to the district but will no longer be considered City of Marysville employees. The district will be responsible for the coverage of insurance, pension, all of it. What remains with the city is the UAL. There's currently a memorandum of understanding and a facilities and use agreement in the process of being drafted. It has not been finalized. It has not been officially proposed. It is in the process of being negotiated. That will further delineate the full fiscal schedule and requirement that the city has as part of the annexation process. But as of right now, effective July 1st, the Linda Fire Protection District will be providing fire services to the city of Marysville. Are there any questions?
Discuss that later.
The community and economic development and I've also consolidated the building department into this. Management has to decide whether or not that falls under community and economic development or public works. But as of right now, I've decided to include it in community and economic development. The salary and wage were adjusted due to the combined position for the community development director and the assistant city manager position. 100% of the community development portion of the salary is charged to that department, and the balance is charged to the city manager's budget. There is an affordable housing study that has been partially appropriated and requested per an HCD requirement for new development. If you have any questions on that, I would probably defer to Dan or Jim. They're much more comfortable explaining what those requirements are for that study. All I know is that it's approximately $200,000 that is allowed to be paid over the course of the next 2 years. A portion of that has been appropriated to help with the RFP process, and if we needed to put some sort of deposit on as a retainer for that consultant, because they are rapidly getting booked up because of this state requirement. I have given the community development department and management the flexibility to make that decision, and then everything will go before council as it is a councilable action. Professional services contract for professional planners, outside building consultants, and plan reviews are subject to be renewed starting the fiscal year. It's kind of on a rolling basis just how we do our contracts. I know management advisory services is coming due at some point within the next couple of weeks. They provide our professional planning services, so Kathy Pease, Mike Lukin, those two professionals that you see and that help us out a lot with our zoning and our general plan, that's the firm that they work for. That will be coming due within the next couple of months, and you should see a staff report soon. Professional development for all employees and commissioners have been requested to ensure compliance with updated regulations. There is a Planning Commission Academy program, I believe, and the commissioners, it is being requested that the commissioners be allowed to attend for this upcoming fiscal 27 year.
So how much is that academy?
I believe it's approximately 6,000.
Oh, okay. I totally agree with you, Academy. I just was curious about that number. Thank you.
It's 6,000 just for like the registration portion of it, and then the additional is travel expenses for it. Public Works and Fleet Maintenance. I've decided to consolidate the fleet maintenance into Public Works instead of as its own standalone department. With the fire annexation, fleet maintenance is kind of also seeing an adjustment as well. One of the fleet managers or mechanics is also moving as part of the annexation, and then one of the other mechanics is retaining on as a city employee. So I do want to notate that 25% of the Public Works Director and the Public Works Manager are charged to the general fund. 40% is the enterprise fund, and 35% is streets. There is a 1.5% increase for all bargaining unit employees as it pertains to Public Works and fleet maintenance. And professional costs, primarily engineering services, have been historically charged to grants now. And so we have while we do still have some general engineering costs, a lot of them have been reduced because we're able to charge them off to grants, which has been really great for the general fund. Associated costs with the treatment and maintenance of Ellis Lake. Now, there is a $50,000 line item, and we are requesting to appropriate this in our budget. That way, in the event that other funding falls through, the Yuba Water Agency has a grant that we've been utilizing to pay for the Ellis Lake treatment. But with everything that's going on with them, I wanted to make sure that the general fund had enough money that we could appropriate in the event that the funding fell through, that we would still be able to treat the lake. Conservation of resources. Our general water and electric bills for PG&E and Cal Water have declined. I know for PG&E, it primarily has to do with the more efficient structures that we have been implementing within City Hall and everything. That's my understanding of it. If you wanted a further breakdown, I'd have to look more into that as to why those costs are decreasing, but we've been remitting less and less to the utility companies for the last several months. And again, I want to say that the annexation is causing the fleet maintenance budget to decrease 60% in salary costs and 46% in operations and maintenance. Again, that has to do with one of the fleet mechanics moving over to the fire district and one of the mechanics retaining on as the city. General debt service. So we have our pension obligation bonds. We technically have 5 distributions for 5 different classifications. That basically means that there's police and fire and administrative PEPRA and police and fire administrative classic. And those all drawdowns have different amortization schedules. So for fiscal years 27 through fiscal years 2032, you'll have several balloon payments at this point in time for that. And we do have the pension obligation bonds being allocated to the enterprise fund and the street fund for the employees that they have as part of that. Various leases for public safety and apparatuses. That is not just the Linda Fire, or that is not just the City of Marysville's apparatuses for the fire department. That's also inclusive of the police department's acquisition of 6 vehicles in fiscal 25. That will not mature until 2030. I have moved all of our vehicle financing, or lease to purchase, to the general fund to a recent accounting adjustment or requirement rather, that needed to be made. All operating leases now have to be put in your general fund. And so I did move that from various other funds, and they should all now be in general debt service. Also part of general debt service includes the administrative fees. So if you have the bondholder or the bank or the financial institution, they always send you an administrative fee when they either bill you or calculate your interest. And your debt maturity ranges from 2028 to 2042, with 2042 being your pension obligation bond. So we have the Streets Fund. Streets Fund is funded by 2 primary resources. So you have the State Highway Users Tax, or gas tax for short, and we collect approximately a minimum of $350,000. This is a very conservative number, and we have multiple categories. So 7 categories of gas taxes have been consolidated into one line item. And then we have road maintenance and rehab, or SB1, as it's familiar with. And we are averaging about a $335,000. That number will probably be increased as soon as I get the numbers for this upcoming fiscal year. Other revenue is just additional gas tax that otherwise doesn't fit into one of the 7 already listed categories in the finance system. And so I do want to make sure that I'm recording that appropriately in the future years. Yuba County Measure D is something that we have received annually previously from what I can tell in the finance system, and it's something that I've seen obviously come through on the bank side as well. Interest earnings, again, $25,000 is pretty modest at this point in time. The interest rates for SB1 are sitting at about 390 to 410 basis points depending on the day or quarter. All of that is invested in the local agency investment fund, or LAIF. And that is something that we've been utilizing to offset, not the interest, but the whole SB1 is to offset some of our major road projects or CDBG contingencies. These are the streets fund expenditure portion of it. Salary and wage is about $409,000, and operations and maintenance is about $429,000. This budget specifically is always very close. We basically, as much as you're mandated by the state to spend down those SB1 funds annually, we just got a letter from the state controller's office dictating that we underspent last year. And so that caused us to purchase some equipment that would help us better our roads in-house instead of having to outsource it. And going forward, we will make sure that we're on top of that expected to be spent dollar amount that the state wants us to spend. So I do want to keep that in mind as we start some of these larger road projects. Streets fund, 40% of the Public Works director salary and manager salaries are allocated to, that's a mistake, are allocated to Fund 21. There is a 1.5% increase for the bargaining unit employees, and the cost allocation for fleet maintenance has decreased due to the fire annexation. Again, I do want to note that there's a proportional amount of general liability, workers' comp, unfunded pension liability, and the pension obligation bond that has been allocated to the street fund. Now we're getting into our wastewater enterprise. So they have two major revenue streams. Your regular sewer fees at $4.1 million, your leachate disposal, which is $115,000, and then interest at $110,000. Interest is also based on the sewer project funds that we refinanced in 2021, and those project funds have been spent down, or we're beginning to spend them down more aggressively as the 5-year maturity date comes, which if we don't spend down the full balance will be subject to arbitrage. The wastewater expenditures, you're at $4.2 million. Salary and wages is about $675,000. Operation maintenance is about $3.58 million. Almost 50% of the $3.58 million is the payment to the Linda County Water District for the processing and management of the discharge that the utility makes. The rest of it is just various operation maintenance costs, whether that's chemicals or various other utility billing from it. And our utility management service is our billing company is approximately $200,000 just to process those bills. So everything is kind of lumped into there. Wastewater fund, this is 40% of the Public Works Director and Manager salaries are allocated to Fund 50. For the other management salaries, which was the City Manager, Finance Director, Accounting Manager salaries, they were initially at 25%. They are now at 20%, so it decreased the burden to the utility. There's a 1.5% increase for bargaining unit employees. They are under the same unit as Public Works. And again, the cost allocation from fleet maintenance has decreased due to the fire annexation. Again, just to reiterate, some of the largest costs to the utility is the Linda County Water District payment, the utility management services payment, and debt service. Again, proportional values of general liability and different types of insurance, the unfunded pension liability, and the pension obligation bonds have been allocated to the utility as per the sewer rate study. So my closing remarks to City Council. First and foremost, thank you for having me here today to go through this. I do want to notate that the fire annexation is a significant transition to the organizational structure for the City of Marysville, and it is something that we should be monitoring very closely, and it should not be taken lightly. The impact to the city is to increase services and is also to ensure that it provides a higher quality of service to the community. We do have consideration for a human resources director position as requested within the budget. And again, after my closing remarks, we can discuss this further.
You have proposed resources.
Correct.
Thank you.
There's also the rising costs of insurance to consider. State requirements related to housing. Again, that has to do with the HCD housing study. And then you have filling vacancies to better institutional capacity. That's really geared towards the administration as well as the police department to ensure that they can operate at a very safe level. Increased costs relating to IT, cybersecurity, and AI. As part of the information technology, the city now has to also implement some significant guidelines and protections against AI. It's a requirement also through insurance, and it's a recommendation through a lot of our financial institutions. Another major change is the CalOSHA appeals. Again, it's a net zero budget item. We're drawing down from the reserve. I just wanted to, for transparency purposes, include it in this budget document so we understood where the money was coming from and that it was being expended. And then again, investment in idle funds. I can't stress how important this is for the city. I do want to make you all aware that there is a maturity set to mature on 6/30 at the end of this month, and with the direction of our CFPs, or our certified financial planners, there may be a recommendation to do a 2-year T-bill to lock in a higher interest rate to not necessarily be subject to the volatility of today's markets. That 2-year bill is sitting at 382 basis points at this point in time, and there will be an initial investment of $1.4 million, which equates to about $110,000 each year of investment. And so that recommendation, I have a meeting with our CFPs later this week or next week to discuss that transaction. So I do want to notify you that our idle funds and our investments, they are being managed both by in-house and by our financial planners.
That'll be interesting to know for the discussion, what is the projected reserve? And because if you're going to commit something for 2 years, you want to know what portion of the reserve it is. Anyway, is that your presentation?
Yes. Are there any questions?
Thank you. We will go with questions and comments. Marjorie, you will go first. Pardon me, Stuart, you will go second. Brad third, and Vice Mayor.
I think I already gave my comments about the HR position. I think that wages and benefits should be included in the agreement, potential negotiation agreement, and also the general services costs. They should share in that as well. That's a cost of the department. And I'm unsure if when the negotiation for that position will start with Linda Fire Department, but those are my recommendations. I mean, when I look at the amounts, it's a lot, I just think that we should start them at a lower range, and so I figured it was $432,000, an offset from Linda Fire for the salary positioned only for the HR director. That costed the city at $302,000, and assuming going through the budget and identifying the number of staff that we currently employ, there's 58 of them, and so you divide that by the 302 by 58, we're spending $5,200 per employee to have an HR director. While I just know schools, and I know our staff, we had more employees than that, and it wasn't that cost. And I get it; it's been years, but I could go back and look at their budget as well, because I think it's a lot for our city to endure right now with the potential that we're giving up some of our reserves. You know, what, $690,000 over multiple years for the Linda Fire annexation. So those are my concerns. Thank you. And you did a great job, by the way, always.
Stuart.
Excellent presentation. I wanted to clarify our housing element. We are required to produce a housing element to the state of California every 8 years. Is that not correct?
It's every 8 years.
Isn't it? 8. I said 8. And so ours was done in 2019. It was approved and it's due on 2027. Yes. Which is what is in the budget, to do the housing element. And we have to go out to bid to do that. Yes? Yes.
A portion of it was budgeted.
Portion of
we're
it.
not. We're estimating the cost to be $200,000 over 2 years. If a portion of the $100,000 was budgeted at this point in time, if the cost this fiscal year exceeds that, we'll be addressing that at mid-year. In my opinion, because it is statutory
Yes.
and it's required,
Yes.
we would go out for a supplemental appropriation at that point in time once we had a better idea of what that cost was going to be to us.
Yes. So my understanding is the housing element is the only element that is statutory and is required. And if a city does not comply, they are required to do a housing element every 4 years. Is that not correct?
I believe there are two elements that are required, the housing and the safety element.
Safety, yes. Safety is the newest.
And my understanding on the cycle is it's every 8 years unless you have difficulty with certification, and then the HCD tightens that down to 4 years. And we do not want to be in that position.
No, we do not. And we are not. And so I just wanted to clarify that because we are compliant and have been with our housing element, which was at one time the only element required, safety has recently become statutory as of the past 2 years, I believe.
I think so.
Yes. Again, so this is great that we are compliant and that this is the only amount we will need for the next 8 years. Thank you.
I think the other challenge regarding the housing element is the state is working on new RENA numbers, which are the minimum levels of housing we should be able to accommodate, not necessarily build, but accommodate.
Yes.
And that will likely enter into this housing element to analysis and add complexity to it.
And we want to be ahead of that as we want to keep full control in our city of how we provide housing. And we don't want the state to suggest anything otherwise. And so this is one of the most important things we as a city must, adhere to. Excellent. Thank you.
Mr. Hudson.
So there's a lot. I think this is my 7th time sitting here on this dais listening to the budget, and every time we've cleared the smoke and mirrors. Every year, it's gotten a little more clear and a little more clear and a little more clear. And I think you've done a phenomenal job. I know that the mayor's made continual suggestions on things he wanted to see with a little more line items, and I appreciate that because this was clear and concise. I've sat here for hours before listening to presentations, and I just want to say that when I started, and I know I've said this before, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but when Councilman Buttigieg and myself got on this council, we were in dire straits. We were bad back then. Barely had $500,000 in reserve. And as time has gone, it has gotten better and better and better. And I think I'm one of the only people that can sit in this room and say that I've actually worked with the last 4 city managers. I don't know about you, Bruce, but 4, maybe 5 city managers that I've actually worked with over the past couple decades. And Jim, you've done a phenomenal job on everything, on picking the crew and getting your people here, and I think that's great. I appreciate the solid presentation. As for the, I'm just going to comment a little bit on Margie's concern with the HR. I've gone back and forth on this a little bit because I often thought that a contracted HR would be, better at times, and then after listening to the numbers and running some own metrics and all that kind of stuff and seeing where we've been at. I've also got to say, John, that you were phenomenal in the transition of the annexation with the fire department and just making sure that the firefighters were exceptionally represented. And that was something that I kind of forgot about a little bit. When you have somebody that's part-time, I deal with a lot of part-time employees in my business, not only there, but at my other job at the college. It's difficult to get things done when you have part-timers. You're waiting for an email to come back or whatever the case may be. And I am intrigued by your metric that you presented, though, Margie, $5,000 per employee. That is interesting. Regardless, I think that the DOE, depending on experience, window that we have from the bottom to the top is an appropriate place. And I believe we've also actually already spent money on recruitment for said position and so forth. And it's on a freeze right now. So I'm in favor at this particular juncture for a full-time person within the city, just because of the fact is that it is, yes, we've gone down a little bit, but the representation and the complexity of all the departments. When we had a city clerk that had 3 titles, and that was part human resources, we contracted with an individual and an organization, and it kind of worked. But that's also when we were defunct back then in the city. So as we've grown and gotten better over the past 7 years, I think it's been very beneficial. I'm sure other people are going to have a different opinion on that. But that's just my thoughts on that. I got lots to say on other subject matters. Sure, the needs come for discussion, so I reserve right of response. But for now, well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Vice Mayor.
One brief question or 2 questions actually. The reserve for the annexation transfer, the 297. That's anticipating the first payment of the reserves, correct, to the fire department?
Yes. If that number changes based on future negotiations, that will be addressed at a future date. And let's say that occurs after the adoption of the proposed budget or for consideration, it will come back to council and we can amend that through the regular council process.
Second question.
Pardon me, Bruce. But right now, this commits us to the larger number. If this budget were adopted as it sits, we'd be committed to the larger number.
The appropriation allows you to spend up to that amount. It does not, in my opinion,
thank you. I'm sorry
require you to.
Okay. For the HR position, this seems to be the questioned area. Within this budget being balanced does not include any reimbursement or sharing with the fire department, correct?
It does not.
Okay. So I have made it clear, I think, that I am in favor of a full-time HR. Councilman Hudson and I have been here, I don't know how many years, without a John, and it's been unruly, to say the least, in so many situations. So after seeing what John was able to bring to us, hopefully filling that position with the same level of expertise, I think it's the way to go. Showing that we have a balanced budget, even without the sharing agreement, I think is pretty significant, although I do think that we need to have that sharing agreement at some level, whatever that level might be. So I am good with those numbers. In my opinion, I understand Councilmember Rollins' comments about making sure we have everything covered with the human resources, including all the expenditures, but at the same time, we're going to try to get the most we can get in a sharing agreement anyway with the fire department. So if it's 30% of something or 40% of something else or 20% of something, I think it all comes out in the wash at the end. So that all being said, I am in favor of this. I think you have it proportioned right in here. Obviously, we'll see in the negotiating. Hopefully, we'll find out what that negotiated number is before this position even becomes filled. So we'll know how it fits. I think you have done an amazing job on this. The mayor and I have sat through many, many meetings with you and with all the staff. Jim, you too. And you guys have brought this full circle and to a good conclusion, I believe.
Thank you.
So, thanks.
Well, let's start with the concept of a balanced budget. Only in municipal accounting could this be called a balanced budget. Only here. We're pulling how much? $597,000 from reserves. That means we have an operating deficit of $597,000. So it's really not balanced. Well, they're not all one time. One of them's projected to be over years. It's the OSHA lawyer and whatever the transfer to the annexation. Annexation. Well, they wanted $890,000 year one in their original draft of that MOU, and it's different now, thanks to the pressure I think you and I put on. So there's a deficit. It's a balanced budget in municipal finance speak, but in the real world, it is not a balanced budget. I'll go to HR now, and then I want to get into the transfer further to the annexation, transfer of reserves for the. I did some research on. I asked AI the question, and it came back with all kinds of answers with references and what have you. What size organization needs an HR executive? And in the private world, it's different than in the municipal world. Municipal world, the head count is lower. In the private world, you don't get into one unless it's 100 to 150 people. Someone we all know has 110 employees here in this local area, and he pays $2,000 a month for HR consulting. Granted, he doesn't have a police department, but it's different in that world. That same question, though, when it came to municipal, had a different answer. It said at 50 head count. 50 to 150. It didn't say at 50 for sure. It just said 50 to 150 an HR executive. We are at 58, a little bit above the threshold, and we're into a full-blown executive, a high-level executive, plus a staff. And that seems extravagant to me. Extravagant. And particularly since, if we look at in the proposed baby sharing arrangement, there are 50 people at the fire department, as I understand it, as newly constituted. There'll be 50 there. And we're 58. Now, we have a police department, so that's more complicated. But if it was 40% sharing, we would still be paying 50% more than they are for this. Now, if it's only the 58 and having a full-on executive with a staff and the associated overhead, that's an extravagance. I will speak against it today, and I will speak against it further every time it's brought up. Yes, we do need HR, and definitely John has brought things to the city we did not have before. It's just, have we thought of another way to handle this new situation where we might not have a contribution from the fire district? And do we really want to eat $311,000 of headcount costs? I'll move on from there. This transfer of reserves, I don't know about the rest of you. Well, I know Bruce and the Vice Mayor, did not know about it until 2 weeks ago. It was news, shocking news. We had no hint of that. All we'd heard was there's going to be an annual savings. Then all of a sudden, they want $890,000, and in fact, in the very first draft of the MOU we saw, they wanted it day one. They'd consider something else, but they wanted it day one. Okay, so I looked into this. Feasibility study, which is the root of this. Feasibility study states reserves from Marysville can be contributed at one time or another to Linda. And it's something about making sure no community is financially supporting the other. Okay. That's buried deep into the feasibility study. Now, feasibility study was completed in February 2025. And it was presented to the council at one of the February 2025 council meetings. And it's properly recorded in the. However, staff that presented it, and this is no knock on Kyle, Chief Ekstrom, but the staff that presented it was Chief Ekstrom. Although he works for us, he's also a counterparty in this negotiation. And frankly, it just seemed odd to me that a counterparty would be presenting this. Let me pull up the record of that meeting. Okay, here it is. Fiscal analysis, no fiscal impact. Well, not today. There's fiscal impact, particularly if you know how this works, because as I have now learned from council, what's in the feasibility study, once it's blessed by the council, we've basically written LAFCO a blank check to recommend we move reserve someplace else. Recommend. We don't have to take a recommendation. But this is an incredibly important document. And when I sat down to look at the agenda for that meeting, it was in consent calendar. Feasibility study, I just figured they're just going to tell us if it's feasible, right? This could work. But no, there were commitments, potential commitments embedded in that. And we were not made aware of that. We were not made aware of that. So LAFCO, we had the tax sharing agreement, which we passed in August of 25. It had some false assumptions as it arrived at a 41.5% share of Measure G, only because whoever drafted that, I think it was counsel for Linda Fire who drafted that. They had not factored in the impact of the 40% sharing on property tax on all the accounts. Once that got taken care of, and Vice Mayor and I are the two who pointed this problem out, management. Then it was able, once that was figured out, and there was a bogey of $2.4 million in revenue, then the share of Measure G money could come down to the 30% range to hit their $40,000. But again, we have a document placed in front of us. And I've never been through an annexation. I had no idea the impact of a feasibility study. It was just, it's feasible. You know, I'm reading this thing, it looks like it's feasible. That's all it says. In fact, it says, go to, executive summary, here it is. Sufficient revenues exist to support joint annexation with cost savings for the city of Marysville. Key findings at the very beginning of this feasibility study. Well, that's frankly misleading as to the entire document, and here we are getting presented this without a warning from someone who should have known better. I don't know who should have known better, but it was presented to us and presented by a counterparty. And I understand the counterparty has a annexation consultant and special counsel. I also understand that our counsel is not involved in this directly until the last couple of weeks. So I'm put off by this. I'll accept the responsibility of not reading that thing as carefully as a reflection I should have at the time. I'll own that. But I don't think that's the only problem with this document. And so we're being asked to transfer hard-earned reserve. And the justification is to avoid the city getting rich off of the fire district. I'm not certain that's a proper analysis. Anyhow, we have an MOU now that has been redone. The first draft was unconscionable, and the second draft, the draft that you've seen, Vice Mayor and I saw the first draft. It was horrible. The draft you've seen is a vast improvement.